Hey, welcome everybody to another episode of the Logistics Lens. Really glad you have the time to check out this session. This is going to be amazing. It's with really a legend in our community, and I know he's very humble, but today we have the Honorable Alan Estevez, who has served in so many key positions in our community and corollary communities that we'll talk about too. But I just want to say, sir, how appreciative I am of you being here today. Thanks for making time to talk with me.
Always happy to do so, Kevin.
Well, sir, like I said, you are truly a legend. You've been in the community for some time. I think if I did
well, let's not confuse legend and length.
Okay. Hey, whatever word you want to use is fine by me. I'm good with whatever. But I've known you for a long time from a distance as I was coming up through the Air Force when you were in key positions, very senior positions. And then as I got a chance to work with you inside NDIA when you were the chair of the logistics division, and I got to serve as your vice, which was a real honor. And appreciate that very much. But sir, I just want to start off by kind of asking you, can you give us a brief overview of how you climbed from where you started to really some of the highest levels in our government, not just in logistics, but your last job that you had in commerce?
Many years ago. Many years ago. I started as a GS5 in what was then Military Traffic Management Command, morphed into SDDC, Surface Deployment Distribution Command, and is now Army Transportation Command. So I started there in 1981, taking a civil service exam, an exam that they no longer give, about a year out of college. And so I was an intern, a 579 intern in Bayonne, New Jersey, and climbed that little ladder. Went to Oakland for a couple of years, Midnight and Western area. I came back to the headquarters in Falls Church, moved on to the Army staff for a couple of years, and then the OSD staff, multiple jobs there. And I guess what I would say is all through that time, first, a couple of things, I was lucky enough to have some really good mentors that were watching out for me. And I got those good mentors by working hard and being willing to take hard jobs.
Well, what career field did you come into when you did the ladder? You said, was it 579 or 7911?
I was an Army transportation intern.
Army transportation. You came in as a GS5. Is that what I heard
That's
you say?
Correct.
What in the world? Okay, where did you go to college, sir?
Rutgers.
Rutgers. Okay.
A political science degree.
Okay.
What zero background in Army transportation or Army logistics? Right?
So let's put him in the transportation.
However, I did load trucks for a year. I did have a Teamsters card. I was in the union local, headed up by Tony Provenzano, the guy who ostensibly killed Hoffa.
Oh. Okay. I never knew that about you. What caused you to come into the government? Did you have that plan before you started school, or was it something that developed during school?
It was something that developed after school. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. Now, I do have a family background of service. My father's a retired colonel.
Oh, okay. From what service?
Army.
Okay.
Army infantry officer. My mother spent time as a Navy civilian, and then time teaching school. And by the time, my father retired when I was young, about 5, and both my parents were teaching school. So, definitely a background in service. And it wasn't like I was unfamiliar with the military. I did understand what the little things on the shoulders meant, and no one had to teach me that.
Was your dad? You said he was an Army colonel in Army Materiel Command.
No, he was an infantry colonel.
Oh, infantry. Okay, so was he kind of rough on you? Was he like, hey, you better get your stuff on one side?
No. So I'm sure he would have been happy if I had gone to West Point, but more so from the free education standpoint.
Of course. Yeah. Yep. Understand that. Well, so with that kind of military background and you making the decision to go ahead and join civil service right out of school, I mean, what what caused you to stay in logistics? Actually, let me back up. Did you choose to go into transportation, or was it just a job opening that you said, you know what, I need a job, and I think that's what I'm gonna put my
Job
hands on.
opening, and I figured I would do that until I had figured out what I wanted to do. And then, about a year or so in, maybe I said, "Hey, this is pretty cool. I think I'm enjoying myself doing this." And then I applied myself, and like as I said, we got people gave me hard jobs. I got good mentors, and I climbed the ladder pretty rapidly.
Yeah, so you definitely climbed that ladder, and we'll talk about that. But I guess I'd like to know, were there any specific events or experiences along the way that kind of helped you craft your desire to stay in logistics and really kind of how you flourished as a logistician over your federal career?
Well, I think once I decided I was going to stick it out, and started like looking for what's my next level. I'm willing to move to California for a couple of years. Decided I had to go to the headquarters if I wanted to keep on a tra- upward trajectory, because that's where grades were. Uh, so the logistics thing was decided, but I think the career maker for me was I had been in Mitnick at the beginning of the Gulf War in 1989.
Okay.
I was working in the op center, doing the things that you should be doing at that point. And I got an opportunity to go work on a special project on the Army staff and something they were standing up called Strategic Logistics Agency.
Okay.
So I went there and I started working some ITV related stuff, in transit visibility related stuff. And then as the war came to an end, they asked me to stay on and be their focal point for the Army logistics scrub of how the Army did in the Gulf War from a logistics standpoint.
Oh,
So I
okay.
was one of the key authors of the after action report on Army logistics. And that got me way past the transportation realm, right? That truly made me a multifunctional logistician. I learned a lot, and it was a great assignment. A young, 30-year-old, 31-year-old kid up there briefing the chief staff of the Army.
Wow. Yeah. So you got some attention at that point, maybe even the most up to that point to, hey, I've observed this. I'm making evaluations about how we did, where we could improve, and you're literally briefing the chief of staff. Wow. How was that? How was that experience as a young 30-year-old briefing the chief of staff?
I look back on it now and said, but I'm sure I was probably a little bit nervous. But frankly, at that point, I was used to being around flag officers, so it wasn't like that I was rocked by being around a flag officer.
Right, right. So from
But
your
I will say, Kevin, fast forward years later, you know, when I was the deputy undersecretary for acquisition technology and logistics, and I have people come into my office, and I'd sit there and say, you know, when you were at GS 15 coming into this office, you probably weren't just willing to start chattering off and tell people what they really thought. You kind of practiced what you were going to say when you're up there. So I
yeah.
can't expect that that's what's going to happen when these people come in. So you're going to have to draw them out to get the real scoop of what's going on out there.
So since you had lived that dream yourself, you were perhaps a little more aware of how people felt briefing the AT&L at that point. Well, you have a calm demeanor about you. I don't think I've ever seen you riled up. Now, maybe I was just had the good fortune of not having seen you in that way. I don't know. But so as a young logistician coming up now, if you were to have a chance to speak to a young Army logistician who's just coming in and maybe not in the transportation field, but anything, what would you tell them? How would you say, hey, I lived this life. You can go on to do great things. What advice would you give them?
No, it's the same things that, same kind of mantra I've been going through. One, you got to put your shoulder in, you got to learn your business, right? Learn your trade. Uh, and, don't get yourself in the microscope zone of that either. See what's going on around you, right? Uh, when I was doing that Army after action, I learned a hell of a lot about air mobility command at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
as you can imagine. So you got to look and see what the other services are doing. If you want to be a military logistician, understanding how to be a good joint logistician, I think is important. Uh, so you dig in, be willing to volunteer to do those hard jobs.
Mm-hmm.
You might not be successful in everything that you do, but you should put your best effort, and people will recognize that. And then, the right mentorship will come along, I believe, if you do that. And people notice, I'm always have my eyes out for good talent that I want to bring along with me, and that hopefully will eventually be successor to whatever jobs you've had.
Yeah. I think that's very interesting and really a great point. When I've talked to other people, they say the same thing about, really focus on your job that you have right now. Make sure you learn that inside and out. But a slight difference that you said right here, sir, was understand kind of the context, right? Not just the world you're living in and responsible for, but how it kind of goes out in the various ripples of the community, how it ties into to the rest of the corollary parts of what we're doing. Am I capturing that
Yeah,
right?
no, that's exactly right, Kevin. Because if you can become this one expert in your space, and that's good, and you can feel good. But if you really want to be a leader in this space, you have to understand why you're doing it.
Yeah. Don't. Yeah. Okay. I got you. That makes sense. Okay. Well, so I want to move into the last three jobs that I believe that you had when you were in civil service, because I know now you're serving in industry, but we'll kind of walk through the last three jobs that you had, and I may have the dates wrong. I hope not. But when you were the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Logistics and Materiel Readiness, or what a lot of us remember as LNMR, I think that was roughly 2011 through 2013. And you had very specific responsibilities, but here you are, really at the top of the supply chain world, and I'm using generic terms here, but what actions were you able to take, not just yourself, but the community, to boost the visibility of our supply chain and how we, as at the time DoD, could be responsive for keeping those critical parts available to support our weapon systems? Do you remember any specific actions or initiatives that you put into play?
Yeah, so a couple things. One, let's again put context. I was the principal deputy LNMR, right,
Mm-hmm.
from 2006 to ostensibly 2011. So I was already doing more or less
Right.
the job, right? And then in 2009, at the flip of Bush administration to the Obama administration, I was the acting ASD. So 2 years before I was actually confirmed into that job, I was doing that job, right?
Okay.
So instead of saying 2011, 2013, it's really 2009 to 2013.
Okay.
And Ash Carter, who was the undersecretary for AT&L at the time, after a couple of months working with him, he told me, don't even think that you're acting. You do the job the way it needs to be done. So you have carte blanche to do whatever changes you want to do and do
Wow.
the things you need to do. All right. So now, again, context of the times, a couple of things. When I'd been the principal deputy, I was heavily involved in the MREP program that carried over to when I was acting. And, fielding those MREPs isn't like just fielding MREPs, right? Here's a new truck, right? First it was like, okay, we got them. getting them to first Iraq and then Afghanistan was, a logistics challenge.
Sure.
So figuring all that out, working with Transcom, and I was heavily engaged in that. And then you realize when we flipped them into Afghanistan, and I was the acting ASD at that point. I remember walking in Afghanistan. I was on one of battlefield circulation tour. And I was talking to an Army lieutenant colonel who was the sustainment battalion commander. And he told me, sir, in order to order a brake shoe for this MRAP, I have to order an axle assembly because it wasn't cataloged.
Yeah.
Something that most people don't even know what the hell that is, Right? But anyone who's ever walked into an auto zone to replace the windshield wiper knows you go to that book and it says, it's a Bosch is this number, wiper clean is this number, or whatever. Well, that's what cataloging is, right, in the logistics world. So I put on this whole push to get MRAPs cataloged so that we could get supplies to these MRAPs that we're pushing onto the battlefield and working through that. And again, putting things in context, again, my last year as principal deputy, we did have the nuclear crisis where we had shipped a fuse for a nuclear weapon. I know it's as an Air Force loggee, it's
yes, I know this story well.
a scarring affair. So I was deeply involved in the cleanup of that. And again, like things that you can think about. We should never be doing this business by rote. We always need to be thinking through the things around the business. And then again, when I became the acting, about 2 months into Carter's time as ATL, he called me up to his office and he said, and this was before the big surge in Afghanistan, but we were actually surging 25,000 troops at that time. It wasn't, another 60,000 that we put in. And we were drawing down Iraq heavily. And he said, these are logistics wars. And you're the only person on the staff who's ever been to Afghanistan or Iraq, which was true, because logistics is engaged on the battlefield. Most of ATL was thinking about a weapon system that's going to come into use 10 years from now for hopefully the next war. Didn't work out that way. But he said, I want to go and look at the landscape. And so let's go with next week. I said, okay. So I got heavily engaged, and I'm glad I did this. And it's, I think one of the legacies on how we were operating from a logistics perspective on the battlefield in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I spent a lot of time going back and forth, talking to kids, trying to figure out what things we could do to make life for a soldier, sailor, airman, Marine on that battlefield easier and hopefully bring them home whole.
Yeah. Boy, I'll tell you that is just so terribly important for the senior leadership to get out and talk to, your term, the kids that are in the trenches doing the work that quite frequently have a completely different viewpoint, the working person's viewpoint versus the senior leader who's, it could be easily so detached from what's happening in the field. But I remember that about you. I remember that you got out a lot in every position that I ever knew you to be serving in. And I think, would you agree that that really helped you revise and craft policy that did result in making things better for the person in the field?
100%. Because then you can put yourself, you obviously can't put yourself fully into their boots because they're living there and living it. But you can get a perspective and try to live up to that perspective.
Well, I think you did. I'm not just saying that. I think that that's one of the things that's known about you is your willingness, your desire to listen and then take action. I'm curious your thoughts on, peacetime operations versus wartime operations. You obviously have served in both. When it comes to resilience for our supply chain, are there things that we can and should be doing in peacetime that will help us in wartime? I mean, clearly the answer there, I think, is yes. But what are some of those things that we need to be focused on now to be ready in wartime?
Yeah. First, we do need a resilient supply chain. resilient industrial base, and we do not have that now. Right
Mm.
now, some of the things that are needed are cash, because we need to have a more steady stream of demand signal out to the supply chain. Companies just can't have fallow production capability; they'll go broke,
Right.
right? So they need to have their production capability filled. Uh, and we have small programs like DLA Warfighter.
Mhm.
The Warfighter program does some of that, but we need a more robust capability around that with longer stream demand. We need to be encouraging companies to and doing it through contract vehicles. I'm more willing to give you a contract if you're going to modernize your production so that you have more productivity out of the plant infrastructure that you have. And then we need to be diversifying, and not just with us and with our allies, assuming we have allies, to draw on the capabilities from our global perspective. Um, those are just some of the things. It's not an easy thing to do. Now, I will say, if you look at some of the programs we did, when you put hard focus, like we did when we had troops in contact. Of course, we have troops in contact right now, as you and I are speaking. But when we had troops in contact on the ground in Afghanistan and Iraq, you can get people to focus on speed in the supply chain, speed in the acquisition thing. I mean, we turned around making MATVs, the lightweight MRAP thing that was geared towards Afghanistan, in a year. Those things were flowing off production line within a year.
Right. Well, so that's a question for you, sir. When we're in the thick of things, like you mentioned, clearly we are now, just over the weekend here with Iran, but how do we convince or justify, show the need for greater resources when we're not in the thick of things, but we know we need to be preparing for the thick of things? How do we go about showing and proving that we need greater resources?
Well, so we do have, you know, first we have to figure out how to make the money go further. Second, we need to decide, you know, things like what Defense Logistics Agency does with MREs, right? They have MRE capability on call. The companies aren't producing, but they have the capacity to do so. Now, DLA is spending a little bit more per MRE, but that means not just MREs for a wartime scenario, but if I have to go to a blizzard in Minneapolis or a hurricane in South Florida, we have the capacity to feed people, or a disaster anywhere in the world, right? So we need to think through how those things could work in the industrial base. Well, we have to look at the organic industrial base and figure out what pieces of that, but we also don't want to build an organic industrial base that makes the commercial industrial base turn away from doing those things because there's competition.
Yeah. So it's not an easy task to accomplish. It seems. I mean, it's very complicated. That, like you said, commercial industrial base needs to have a constant demand signal from us so that they, it's worth their modernization of facilities or processes, whatever case it may be. But we also need that organic capability to help complement when we get from the commercial world. Not a really easy calculus, but I think that's what our leadership. You talk about DLA a couple times. I mean, General Simmerly, what a great person. He and his team at DLA, I personally think they're doing amazing work to try to, not just be responsive, but predictive in the way that they're seeing what the needs are going to be of the warfighter. And the warfighter program is part of that, but it's that balance between having enough now, but if we need to surge, whether it be organically or in the commercial world, we've got to be able to do that too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's not an easy task, but they're working it. The services are, and certainly DLA is too. I want to move on to your time at AT&L, And again, I could have the dates wrong. I think I was looking at your confirmation dates in these positions. That's why I may have been a little bit off on the LNMR. But
The day I got confirmed as LMR, I almost became the acting deputy AT&L.
okay, all right. Well, I was trying to come up with a valid excuse. Maybe I failed. I don't know.
Uh,
But
so when Secretary Carter fleeted up to be DepSec,
okay,
and Secretary Kendall fleeted up to be Undersecretary AT&L, I became the acting deputy AT&L
okay,
in November 2011.
okay. So I was close. I think I said. Oh no, I did not.
October 2013 was when I was confirmed into
Okay.
that job.
Why am I even, I'm not arguing with you, but why don't I just say, sir, when were you the ATML? All right. So anyhow, when you moved into that position, whether it was acting at the time, or confirmed, what kind of reforms did you pursue to try to help shorten the acquisition timelines? Because that's obviously something that's being looked at very strong now, with the acquisition transformation efforts. But during the time that you were serving there, is that a battle you were facing there too?
Um, yes and no. You know, we did a whole bunch of things during that time in acquisition reformy type. Um, you know, First we were implementing a huge congressional law at that point, WSARA, Weapon System Acquisition Reform Act, uh, that had a whole bunch of new requirements in it. And we were focused on cost because it was, the era of sequestration and the like, too.
Oh yeah.
Now, at the same time, we were fighting two wars. You know, we had drawn down Iraq, and then next thing you know, we were fighting the ISIS fight.
Hmm.
Uh, and we were still, had forces, U.S. forces engaged in Afghanistan, even though we were drawn down and we were building capability up for for Afghan forces. So, you can talk about rapid acquisition. Well, MRAPs were rapid acquisition, aerostats were rapid acquisition, all sorts of sensor capabilities that we put out there were rapid acquisition. And some of them we knew we were going to fail, and we had cash because we had, the God, I'm having a iced brain, but we have the cash influx for the war,
Okay. Okay.
right? Outside of standard appropriation, we had a war fund that we were spending. And okay, so some of these things we were trying didn't work. We have kids in contact. We're going to do what we need to do to give them the capability to win on the battlefield,
Right.
or at least to protect themselves. Um, so, a lot of that stuff was rapid acquisition stuff. Even what the current administration wants to do is probably not going to get a jet faster through rapid acquisition, a brand new jet. Right? You can do a modification of an existing jet to some degree, rapid acquisition. But even that, because that's a little more complex engineering than a truck, which is what
Yeah.
happens.
So sir, how closely are you keeping in tune with the changes that have rolled out or that are rolling out now on the acquisition? I think they're using acquisition transformation, not
Yeah.
reformation.
Like, I think a lot of it is, I don't think anything there is like brand new under the sun. I think, some of it we'll have to see how it plays out. They're not going to change the laws of, like, essentially the way acquisition operates on a three-legged stool. I can have cost, schedule, performance. If I expedite, schedule, I'm probably going to pay a little bit more, and I'm going to give on performance, right? And, as you know, when we were last week in Tampa, or 2 weeks ago in Tampa, we were talking about this. And, as long as you iterate, if you're able to iterate that performance, there's nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you don't need Mach 2.8. You can live with Mach 2.7.
Right. Right.
Right? So you need to be able to make those trade-offs, and you need to say, like what the Ukrainians are doing today. I'm going to build this type of drone today, and tomorrow I'm going to modify it a little bit because they're going to modify the way they're
Yeah.
defeating it.
Right.
And
Right.
so, we need to be able to walk, chew gum, and fight with exquisite weapons and fight with, today's coddled weapon all at the same time.
right. You bring up Ukraine. What are your impressions from what you've been involved with? How is that going? I mean, are you impressed by how quickly the Ukrainians are in fact adjusting, say for instance, their drone capabilities or some of the other methods they've used where I think they had radios were delivered that wound up blowing up some of the enemy force. What are your thoughts about what's happening in Ukraine even today?
Yeah, I think, again, when you have existential crisis and you have forces in contact, you suddenly find yourself being more innovative, whether you wanted to or not.
It seems to me, and I don't profess to be, an expert on this by any stretch, but it's pretty darn impressive. It's sad, of course, that we're still in the middle of this. I don't know how many years later, 4 years later, perhaps. I could be wrong on that, but it's amazing to me the initial problems we saw or challenges that the Russians were undergoing with their supply chain, and probably still are today to some degree. But even more impressive and surprising to me how well the Ukrainians have done to still be in this thing.
Well, and
Your thoughts?
of course, we risk, overstudying the Ukraine war, and because that's probably not the war we're going to fight,
Right.
right? But there are things that we do need to look at. It's an interesting war because it's got this kind of rapid innovation in drones, and it's also World War One, right? It's trench warfare.
Yeah, it's kind of a dichotomy, two totally different things, but all rolled up into one war.
I mean, the Russians have taken the amount of ground over the last 2 years the Allied forces took in slogging it out during the Battle of the Somme. So it's not a pretty picture.
Yeah, no, it definitely isn't. It's unfortunate, to say the least. Okay, sir, your last job that I am aware of that you had in the political world, so to speak, was Undersecretary of Commerce for Industry and Security. Can you tell us, since a lot of us that are going to be listening to this are loggies, knuckle dragon loggies, of which I'm proud to be a knuckle dragon loggie. What did that job entail, and how does it relate to what we do in logistics?
Um, it does and it doesn't. It's really peripheral to what we do in logistics in the DoD. But the core of that job is technology protection, essentially not allowing our technology, dual use technology, in other words, technology that has commercial application
Hmm.
and a military application, from being sold to our adversaries so then they can apply that technology against us.
Right.
Right? That's the core of that job. Uh, and the way it was kind of built was, back from the 90s, was around a couple of different treaty things. Uh, nuclear proliferation, missile technology proliferation, chem biotechnology proliferation. Uh, so tools and capabilities that would feed into programs like that. And by the time I came along, we had to change that focus to like truly hardcore dual use. In other words, computer chips,
Right. Right.
and the highest end of those computer chips. So I spent a lot of time in that job learning about artificial intelligence and chips that could make artificial intelligence, and then how you made those chips, and then stopping the tools that could make those chips from being sold to China, and the chips themselves from being sold to China, some of which the current administration has rolled back some of those controls. Um, and I was also heavily engaged in sanctions on Russia, controls around Russia. Uh, and so, that was pretty much the core of that job. Now, we have some Defense Production Act capabilities in BIS. We do industrial base studies. BIS has survey authority that no other agency in the government has. So if DoD wanted to do a full survey on some segment of the industrial base, like the space industrial base we were doing a study for NASA and for the Department of Air Force when I was the undersecretary, they have to come to BIS because we have the survey authority.
Oh, so how did you how did you balance what was necessary for national security without hurting U.S. industry's ability to be competitive in the marketplace?
Now, it's one of those tightropes that you walk. So you have to do a couple of things. One, you have to say, is this made anywhere else in the world? Like if I stop U.S. industry from selling it, is that a meaningful thing? And it's not if they can buy the exact same piece of equipment from Germany or Japan or any other country, right? Unless that country also puts on the same controls. And there is a process to get countries to put on same controls through those treaties, and then we did some stuff bilaterally to do that. And it's easier if it's not that many countries can make whatever it is you're trying to control.
Right. Sure.
All right. That's point one. Point two, sometimes you say, yeah, industry, you're going to have to take a hit here. I'm sorry, I'm going to take some revenue, but the cost to national security is too great. And you just have to be cold-blooded about doing that.
Yeah. I'm sure that made you a lot of friends at times when you had to tell them no, but obviously more important to preserve national security.
Well, I spent a lot of time out in Silicon Valley explaining myself.
Is that where you learned so much about artificial intelligence?
Yeah.
So you've been around the horn just a tiny bit. You have just a little bit of experience in our community, and of course, I'm being very facetious. But artificial intelligence, you can't go anywhere without it coming up in conversation. Whether you're talking about inside the DOW or whole of government, or industry, or even just at the house. At the Sampels house here, where we talk about AI and Chat GTP and all these various programs that are out there. How do you envision how AI is going to impact our logistics community over the next, 10 years? What do you see changing in the logistics community because of the advance in AI and automation?
Look, we've been talking about predictive logistics since I was 12. And we have a whole bunch of programs that we've always run. And the defense logistics system is data rich. Much of that data is not harvested for use. Right? A lot of it is just sitting fallow. And a lot of it's dirty. So data does need to be cleaned. But if there's a space that's right for large language model, data mining, data access, with a whole history of transactions and why those transactions take place, it's the logistics space, right? So, and as you know, as an Air Force logistician, we've had aircraft that have been wired with sensors for years.
Right.
Right. Some of that data, again, falls on the floor. But, how many times did this rotor spin in this engine, right? And when is that rotor likely to be replaced? What's the mission profile of the plane that flew that? All that needs to be fed into the logistics system. So we should never have a kid, a tech sergeant or a warrant officer or whatever level they are in whatever service, sit down and say, oh, we're going to hit our reorder point. It's time to order 10 more of these things.
Oh, we don't do that. Come on, sir. What are you talking about?
And they got out the spreadsheet and say, click. All that data should be captured and all that data should be automated. And now we should be looking to say, is this machine right? Or do I need to make a correction to it because my reality on the ground isn't getting captured in the data that it's assessing?
Yeah. So condition-based maintenance, can we ever get there where we're trying to be smarter about how we're doing maintenance. If we see a component's getting ready to die based on all those various factors that you just ran through, and we happen to have the bird in for a scheduled maintenance, all right, let's go ahead and change out that component, even though it's not failed yet.
Yes,
Can we get there?
yes. And in a contested environment, which you and I have talked about ad nauseum, uh, you know, we were doing contested discussions back, during COVID, Kevin, on screens like this. Right?
Yep.
uh, in a contested environment, we need to be that precise.
So what do you think about regional sustainment framework? What are your thoughts on that? Again, probably not a new idea. I mean, we have slices of that have been in place for a while. I'll use, for example, in the Air Force, we have the Support Center Pacific, that we call it the SCIP, and they've been doing field maintenance for some time. But this initiative that rolled out 2 3 years ago, where we're really leaning into putting those MRO and even component level repair capabilities out in the field. How does that all tie in with, contested logistics and the ability to repair things more quickly, do it less expensively because you're not shipping stuff back? What are your thoughts in general about the
Of
RSF?
course, we need that capability, right? We should be building forward, and it has to be dispersed because a lot of those places we're looking at are also within range.
Right. So are we moving fast enough? Are we serious enough about it?
I think we're serious about it. I don't know if we're moving fast enough, but again, it takes some of this takes muscle movement and effort. Uh,
Yeah.
but having the idea and being able to start practicing towards that gets you able to do it quicker too.
Yeah, it sounds to me, and I've been around the RSF movement, I guess, for a couple years, kind of with my NDIA hat on a little bit, trying to help craft some of the early language. But it seems to me like the services are really gaining a foothold on this, and industry is really wanting to lean forward on it too. It seems like there's an obvious uh, recognition that this is a capability we need. But like you said, it takes a while. It's a massive undertaking. My first Logistics Lens podcast was with Joe Brooks, the gentleman at OSD level who's trying to orchestrate all the RSS stuff, and he's got a lot of energy and he's got some great teammates. But this is a massive undertaking, but so necessary.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Um, what are your thoughts, sir, about the overall influence that logistics has on the strategy of military operations? Um, Clearly, as I was coming up in uniform and would go to planning conferences, the great majority of the focus was on what's going to get shot down or what's going to get destroyed, and there was just assumptions that logistics would be there and make it all happen. But I personally feel like logistics and supply chain has gotten a lot more focus recently. What are your thoughts on that?
Um, yes and no. Again, at the height of two wars, I was up there briefing the Secretary of Defense on logistics matters, which was not something that's the norm.
Mm,
Secretary doesn't normally take, at least in the past, more focused on the broader operation than on a specific logistics function. On the other hand, Ash Carter when he was the deputy and when he was the under, he used to tell me all the time, logistics is like air. It's like oxygen.
yeah.
You don't think about it until you don't have it,
Right. Yeah. Very, very true.
right?
Well,
So, uh, I think the focus is important. I think logisticians need to keep squawking to make themselves remembered and noticed in this space. Because again, when you start, well, we'll know when budgets come out whether people care about, spending money on the intel use of artificial intelligence or logistic use of artificial intelligence.
right. Yeah. Well, what do you view as the most significant barriers for bringing in some of those newer capabilities like artificial intelligence or data collection systems or drones, the newer technology, emerging technology. What do you think are the challenges that we have inside the DoW for bringing in some of those innovations?
It's just DOW is big. It's hard to figure out how to start and then scale rapidly, right? And you do need money, and you need a program, and you need a plan to do that. And when it comes to like what you're funding, the log space does get crowded out by some of the other things that you're buying.
Right.
And I sat in all the, I sat at the top of the department in the budget space for years. So
So how did you navigate some of those pressures when it came to trying to justify things that we needed inside our community? But you had, government pressures, Defense Department pressures, and then you also had political pressures. How did you navigate what could certainly be some turbulent seas?
I tried to keep our head above water during sequestration era. I don't know that I did.
That was some tough times. That was, I remember sequestration. Man, that was.
I did double the LNMR budget during that time, though. So.
Well, I'll tell you what, sir, it's really pretty unbelievable your career. I mean, you have done some amazing things and lived through some really turbulent times, tough circumstances, but man, you did so much for our community, and you continue to, like, even things that you're doing now that we won't go into, but I know you're still contributing to what we do inside the department, and you are a person that can teach all of us so much about how to contribute to the community, how to be a good leader. Sir, it is honestly a real honor to have the chance to talk with you today.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Kevin. I don't know how much truth is in what you just said, but it's been I'll look back and say I had a great career. I got to work with a bunch of the best logisticians in the world.
Yeah. Well, we got a lot of great people in the community, and I've had the pleasure of talking to a number of them, with a lot more coming down the pike. But sir, I know you're a busy guy, and appreciate you making time to talk with me today. And I look forward to continuing to work side by side with you as we both care passionately about our community and continuing to advance it. So, any closing words from you?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay. Humble as always, and to the point as always. So for those of you that were able to join in and listen to this session, thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking time. And again, my whole reason for doing this is just to bring our community together. Collaboration is so important. We've got to know what the left hand and the right hand is doing, and learn from folks that have already been there and done that, and how we can take their lessons learned and make today's decisions and actions even better. So please keep tuning in. And again, Honorable Estevez, thank you, sir. It's an honor. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kevin. Really appreciate it.